Hello everyone, welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host Paula Taylor and this is episode 190. So today we are going to talk about living in the liminal, and it's funny, I had a couple of topics in mind that I was really excited about, and then when I was trying to decide which one I was going to talk about, none of them were feeling very resonant for this week's show. And so I was like, well, what do I want to talk about? And as I was kind of thinking through and feeling through kind of where I've been and what I've been dealing with, I realized that this topic of living in the liminal came up. What does that mean? How do we do that with grace and a minimum of disruption? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And what I'll start with is just, I've been in a little bit of a funk, I have to say. And that's like when I was in a space where I was feeling really inspired and I had kind of a big shift. And I talked about that a little bit on the last show where I talked about energy vampires and I talked about kind of breaking free from this energy. And then of course, always after that is the integration. Like when we have a big release or a big activation, we have to integrate that energy. And that tends to sometimes kind of put us back in a space where we feel a little more contracted or a little heavier. And there's always like a risk there of kind of getting stuck. And I felt like I kind of got stuck in a funk. And then when I was looking at these topics, I was like, ugh, I don't really want to talk about any of these things right now. And maybe I won't do a show and blah, blah, blah. And maybe I'll just pull some cards for the full moon. So I'm recording this on the day of the full moon. And the energy has just been like literally off the charts. Last night there was an activation that I heard. That's never happened before. I was in the middle of a dream. This wasn't part of the dream. I heard a loud crash. I thought it was thunder, or like it sounded like lightning had struck like right nearby. Scared the something out of me. And I got up and like started looking out the windows, and the skies were completely clear. Like there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And then I thought, well, maybe somebody like is breaking into something or not. So I went looking around. My husband was still asleep. My dogs were still asleep. Like, I don't know. And then I saw this Schumann resonance update, and it was right around the time that I woke up, and I was like, I realized I heard that activation energy come in. That's how intense and focused it was. It was like a lightning strike. And I think the video that I reposted on TikTok, they were talking about how it was like a lightning strike of energy. So we're living in a really intense time, and we're living in a really wobbly time. So let's talk about, first of all, like, what do I mean by the liminal? And then I'll get kind of back into like my own story about how this topic came up. But the liminal means in between. And like I was thinking about this as like, it's kind of a transition, but it's more nuanced than that. It's more literal than that. We are literally living in between two states of being right now. So we've been in this system, and most of us personally have been more focused on the 3D for thousands of years at this point, probably, or yeah, thousands of years probably, where everything's kind of about the physical. It's about the body. It's about what are we doing with our lives physically? What are we producing that we can physically tangibly see or touch? How are our bodies feeling? It's all been about kind of being in this physical space. And over the last couple of years, starting in June of last year, almost a year ago, we split. The 3D and the 5D started to split. And we've talked a lot about that. You can go back and listen to the shows. There's the first one. There's one called What's the Deal with the 3D, 5D timeline split. And I have a lot more nuance now than I did then, but that's a good place to start if this topic is new to you. But essentially, we are being asked to move beyond the physical realm and occupy more of the spiritual space, the quantum space that is within and around our bodies. It's still a physical place, but it's not a 3D focused space. It is much less dense than that. It's much more loving. It's much more of a spiritually based way of living, being in the 5D. And it's a consciousness shift. It's a physical shift, but we're not leaving the 3D. We're not leaving our bodies. That's partly what makes this so difficult. So I was kind of in this funk, and I was like, I don't know what to talk about, and I don't know what's going on. And I started thinking about like how hard this year has been, because we're in this constant state of transition with like release energy, which is asking us to release some of that denser kind of 3D type energy we're holding. And then activation energy, which is trying to get us to activate more of this like quantum space, this 5D space, and then the integration that's in between. And this used to happen like in a predictable pattern and in a slower pattern. We would have kind of release around the new moon, and then we'd have activation around the full moon, and then we'd move back into release, and it was like this predictable pattern. This is no longer predictable in any way, and part of this is all of the solar weather that we're getting is sending cosmic energy in, and it's intentionally sort of being done for us to invite us through this transition. But right now, this year especially, 2025, is a liminal year. We are in between. It is a literal in between of, we've been in this pattern for so long, we're being asked to release that and move into a completely different way of being. And that can be very dysregulating to the nervous system. It can be very upsetting emotionally to kind of not know what's going on or what's happening. And that's kind of where I was at with things. I actually even made a couple of notes about this topic when I was thinking about it the other day, which I haven't done for a long time. So I kind of had been in this funk, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on. And I was feeling kind of really contracted, and my husband and I were talking about the future and just kind of like feeling a little like futile about it. Like, I don't know what to do, because like we don't know what's happening here, and we don't know what's happening here. There's so many things outside of ourselves that are completely out of our control that it's hard to kind of like, it's hard to find alignment. It's hard to find stability when you're in this like constantly shifting kind of in between. And so I checked in with my guides last night, because I was like, why? Like, I feel like I'm just really dense and stuck. And there was a big timeline shift a few days ago, and I felt the lightning come in. And then like right away, it was like back into this like dense, heavy, contracted energy. And the first thing they said was, stop focusing on your body so much. Which I was like, touche, because there's a lot of physical symptoms that come with this. We call them ascension symptoms, a lot of shifting in the body, because we're literally changing the way our body is made, like what it's made up of, that we're turning on like DNA and lighting up DNA, and these light codes come in and they're like switching things. There's a siren confirmation in the background. And so this is a physical process, and it's very tiring. It's very overwhelming for the body. The body that we are in was not designed to be in this expanded 5D space to the extent we're being asked to transition. And so that's part of this like wobbliness and wonkiness is the in-betweenness of like trying to actually allow for the energetic changes that need to happen in the body in order to fully step into this space of having much more expansion. So I was like, why am I in a funk? Why do I feel so contracted? What's going on? And my guide said, you need to get out of your body. You need to get back beyond your body. You need to expand out. And I was like, I got kind of annoyed, and I was like, I just spent like the last 6 years, probably 5 years, trying to get back into my body, trying to re-embody. There's all of these podcasts. You can go back and listen to all the embodiment stuff I was talking about. It's like, now you want me to leave my body? Like, well, I don't understand. And of course, because we're talking about the 5D, it's not black and white. That's a 3D way of thinking. It's not being in the body or out of the body. That is a trauma response. And I kind of knew, even as I was sort of like railing against them, they were sort of laughing at me, and they're like, it's not that simple. This is not like leaving the body in a dissociative way that we did through trauma. That's a 3D response. I'm either here or I'm not. It's like a black and white thing. This is the much more nuanced idea of expanding your field and living from a space that is beyond the body. And I talked about it a little while ago about this idea of the craft single, where you have this like processed cheese like item, and then wrapped around that is this clear cellophane. And they were like, you need to be out in the cellophane, not stuck in the cheese. So that was the first thing that came in about like living in this transition is to start practicing, start spending more time in the result of the transition, which is this expansion. And it's a lot easier said than done, because the physical energy right now is so dense and it's so heavy, and there's so many people dealing with that density and that heaviness, and that results in a lot of physical stuff going on. I had this hand thing happening that it's on the edge of coming back, and I can feel, again, it's like I keep making this wobbly motion with my hands. It's that liminal, it's the in-between. It's like not quite gone, it's not quite here. And like the fear is like, oh, I don't want this to come back. I don't know if I'll be able to work. Interestingly, I'm being asked to transition more into doing virtual work, for which I don't actually need, I use my hands to move energy virtually, but I'm not putting them on a body. I'm not doing massage strokes when I'm in the virtual. So it's very interesting to remember, first of all, that all of this is being done for us, not to us. I haven't said that in a while. I needed that reminder. But the other thing that was coming through was this idea of, when you're learning a new skill, you have to practice that skill. And there's a point at which it's really frustrating and you feel like you're never going to make any progress. And whenever I use an analogy for this, I always use music because my background's in music. If I'm learning a new musical instrument, no matter how much like knowledge I had, like I've been able to read music since I was about 6 or 7. But I tried to learn the cello a couple years ago, and I got so frustrated because I wasn't very good at it. I could read the music, I could pick up on where kind of I was supposed to put my fingers on the fingerboard, but the technique was not there yet. I just didn't have it. And I decided to step away from it, not necessarily out of frustration. I just didn't have enough time to devote to it to get good enough to where I would feel like I had made that transition. I was in that liminal period of like, I know I can do better, but in order to do better, I would have needed to like put a lot more time and focus into it than I really wanted to, than I had time for. We're in that spot with this 3D to 5D transition. It's like we have a lot of knowledge about this. We have some mental understanding. You could think of this in the 4 steps of spiritual processing as well. We have awareness, a lot of us. If you're listening to me, you probably have awareness or some awareness. We've done the mental processing. We kind of understand it. We've made some sense about where we're going, but like living it in the body, doing the energetic and like physical sort of embodiment of this, like we're not quite sure what that looks like. And so we're in this space, like, and I'm here with you. I can be so expanded and like really, really, really out there at the edge of my cellophane wrapper, at the edge of my quantum field, sort of beyond my body. I'm still in my body, but I'm like expanded beyond my body. And when I'm in that space, my body feels different. It still has pain. It still has the same kind of like struggles that I've had in terms of like being fatigued or, you know, we'll stick with fatigue because this is the easiest way to talk about it. The fatigue is there. I know it's there, but I'm not stuck in the middle of it. I'm not in the middle of that processed dense cheese, kind of like with the cheese melting over the top of me. I'm out in the cellophane wrapper, and I can look back and be like, oh, I recognize that my body is tired or that I feel this fatigue, and I can access all of this 5D energy and start like drawing that in order to like give me the ability to keep going. And this is the ability to keep going, not in a like, my worth is tied to my production, I must do. It's sort of like, I really want to do these things and I don't have the energy for them when I'm in that 3D space because my body is just being a little bit overwhelmed. And I know I'm not the only one who's going through this right now. And I see it in the TikTok comments too. You know, everybody's got all these weird symptoms and old things that you haven't dealt with, or this like eczema thing on my hand, never had that before in my whole life. And all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, here it is. So the guidance I got about this was like, you need to get bigger. You need to get out of the density of the physical body and into that cellophane wrapper, into that quantum space around your body where you can actually nourish yourself through pure energy or light. The body still needs the nourishment of glucose, of the physical. Eventually, as we like, you know, in generations, as we've made this shift, our bodies will look different. We won't consume calories in the same way we do. And there's research around that now about kind of the mitochondria of the cells being able to use light for fuel rather than just glucose. And this is like part of that DNA code shifting and the things that I was talking about that I don't pretend to understand or need to understand, I just trust. And that leads me right into the second thing that came up when I was thinking about this, was that our patience and our trust is really being challenged right now. I don't like the word tested, challenged. I know that we're going somewhere amazing, and I can feel it for myself personally, like in my own timeline, and I can feel it for the collective, for those of us in the collective who are ready for this awakening journey, who are committed to this. We can create an amazingly better world, and we have to trust that we're going to get there, because right now we cannot see it. It's like we're in the middle of the tunnel and we can't even see how far the tunnel goes. We can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. We can't see that it opens into this beautiful space. We're just sort of like stuck in the middle of this, liminal space. We're in the in-between. We're in the density. We're in the compactness of the tunnel. And we've got to trust that we have the ability to move our energy beyond that space. And we have to trust that we're being led somewhere that is going to be more clear, expanded, and harmonious when we can finally get there, when we can finally see it. And it really requires a huge leap of faith beyond which I know I've never taken. And trust has always been a little bit of an iffy thing for me, like trust in my guides, trust in my intuition. And it's okay. It's okay to question things. It's okay to be skeptical. And there's also a point at which, like when I knew I needed to quit my medical job, there was a period of months where like I just didn't have the courage to do it, and I knew I needed to do it. And a lot of that was about the trust, like what's going to happen, what's going to come in this place. There was scarcity stuff around that. So these old kind of limiting 3D type beliefs that we've had are really being challenged right now to be released, to be looked at, to be witnessed, and then to be released. And involved in that process is a huge amount of trust that we are being led somewhere that is even grander. And it's a difficult process to give into that trust, to take these kinds of leaps of faith when you don't see where you're going. I feel like there are periods of time in this liminal where I'm more in that 5D and I really see clearly, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can tell how amazing this is going to be. And then there's times where it feels like I'm like locked in the basement and I don't have a flashlight. And that is the back and forth. And jumping back and forth between these two states is very dysregulating. It's very wobbly. It's very in between and liminal. So the first kind of guidance that I received was more practice of expansion. Don't worry about the density. The release will come, like we're doing the release work, but don't go so far down the road of release that you're going backwards in the tunnel, is kind of the way it's coming through right now. It's like, yes, the release work needs to be done, but you've got to flow with that. What you need to practice now is more of the expansion. More of the expansion. You might be physically in the tunnel. What's beyond the tunnel? Do you need your eyes to see what's beyond the tunnel? No. You have clear senses. You have whatever comes through for you. This is what we're being asked to use more of. Using the senses beyond your 5 senses to recognize that we are transitioning into something that's really grand and amazing. But while we're in this liminal space, we've got to practice getting out to that space, and we've got to have a lot of trust and faith in this process. So the last thing I want to talk about is one of the limitations that I noticed in myself, so I'm sure it's reflected somewhere, of being in this liminal, is that when things are constantly in flux, it doesn't really give you a chance to notice how far you've come. There's, if you're running up the mountain because someone's chasing you, or you're in this dark tunnel, at a certain point, it's hard to see how far in the tunnel have I come? If I can no longer see the light at the end where I entered, and I can't see the light where I'm going. I don't have any idea of like where I am in this process. I can't look back and see how much progress I've made. So I had an experience in the last couple of weeks where I sort of ended up in a conversation with someone that I haven't talked to since kind of the beginning of this year. And this is someone that I've always been in really good resonance with, and really felt a lot of kind of clarity, expansion, and harmony around. And through the course of this conversation, I realized we were in totally different places. And there's no judgment there. It's not like a hierarchy. It's just like my tunnel branched off one way and this person's tunnel branched off a different way, or they were in a different part of the same tunnel. I don't know exactly how that analogy holds, and I don't need to know. What I realized, first I got kind of upset about this, and I was oh, and I always jump to this, I must be doing something wrong, and all of these beliefs I have are maybe wrong, because there was this kind of, was getting a lot of pushback about some of the things that I was saying. And when I got some clarity around it, I realized that I am a totally different person than I was even in January of this year. I am a completely different person. My physical, energetic body is completely different. I have claimed a lot more power than I ever have before in my life. I've had this big solar plexus kind of activation and claiming my power and claiming my space and taking up space. And I take up a lot more space than I even did 6 months ago, because through this transition, what I was just talking about kind of getting beyond the body and living more in the quantum space, I have been developing my quantum body. It's like I've been doing quantum weightlifting. And so my quantum body is quite large, and it's quite empowered, and it is quite clear, expanded, and harmonious when I can access it. Sometimes I'm still in the 3D, which feels really dense and kind of contracted. And all of a sudden I realized that in the sort of power differential, the power differential of this relationship, the expectation I had set was that I was taking up less space, that I was kind of making myself smaller. And as I kind of came into a conversation from the space that I'm in now, I realized through this kind of disharmony or discoherence or misalignment in this interaction, first of all, that there was no judgment about the interaction itself or about the other person or even about the relationship, because that kind of, I had to work through that 3D stuff first. What I realized was this is a beautiful example. This is a demonstration for me of how much growth I've had in this year. Because again, when you're in the middle of the tunnel and you can't see kind of where you started, it's how do I figure that out? And for me, the answer is always going to be through vibration. And going back into a vibration with somebody who I had spent time with kind of at the end of last year, early this year, and then being in the vibration that I'm in now, I just realized I got a chance to kind of, it was like someone shined a light and was do you see how far down this tunnel you've come? You have come such a long way. And because of the wobbliness and this liminality, this sort of, the minute you start to integrate something, something else is coming in and then there's another release. And I talk about it like the bus. So you're on the bus, that's integration, but there's the release stop, there's the activation stop, and then there's the stop where we're being asked to do both at the same time, which is more and more frequent, and is more this idea of being in that 5D of yes, my body can exist and it can be doing detoxing and release and kind of working through old things and expressing the things that come up with that aren't necessarily fun. And I can be in a hugely expanded space where that is not affecting me to the extent that it was. I just looked at my clock and it says 1:11. So that's important. I'm going to say that again. We can be doing release work, allowing the body to do the 3D stuff it needs to do while we are in that expanded space of activation of the 5D. That is the end result of this transition. Again, we're not moving out of the physical body. It might be easier if we did. We're moving into a space beyond the body, where the body exists and we still are connected to the body. We're connected to the earth. We're not disembodied. We've expanded beyond the body into this physical quantum space around our body where we have access to much more information, much more energy, much more light, much more growth. And so through this experience where all of a sudden I realized like this is giving me kind of a looking glass, or it's giving me a view through the tunnel. It's like lighting up the tunnel, to stick with that analogy. And it was like, wow, I really have changed so much this year that I am expressing myself as a different person. And it's showing up in the interactions I have with people. It's showing up in the way that I exist in the world. It's showing up in a lot of this, trying to release this efforting and trying to find more ease with things and trying to find more flow with things, and sometimes stumbling and falling flat on my face, because that's how this work goes. So it's really important to recognize that this is a tough place to be. And I think we're here for probably the rest of this year, or at least a few more months for sure. It's starting to shift, and it's important to understand that we actually do have we have agency here. We don't have control, but we have sovereignty. We have agency. We have the ability to practice this skill of expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding until it starts to become energetic memory. I could have played that cello enough times till it's like my oboe, where I pick it up, and even if it's been 2 years or 20 years, I can still, my fingers know exactly what to do. My mouth knows exactly what to do. It's learning a new skill and honing that skill until it becomes something that feels inherent. That is the challenge of being in this liminal space. So when I asked for kind of guidance about like how do we navigate this with more grace, because we have to navigate it, we have no choice. I mean, you can shut down and just be in the 3D completely, and that's a really tough place to be right now. It's a really dark place. It's a really dense place. It's a really scary place for a lot of people. And those of us who have the ability to move beyond that, we can have a lot of compassion for that. And there's that 5D word. We do not need to let that draw us back into that space. And I realize that's what's been happening to me, is that I've been like getting into this really expanded space and then coming all the way back down into the density and expanding and back into the density. And that's part of the process of learning. And what my guides were essentially saying was like, it's time to take off the training wheels, kind of, is like what I just heard. It's time to start staying in that expanded space, regardless of what is happening in the 3D around you. And that is a lot. That is a big ask. And we wouldn't be asked to do that if we didn't have the capacity to hold that space, and to, again, have a lot of compassion for the people that are in that density without going all the way back into it ourselves. So the other kind of piece of guidance they gave me, so the first piece was this like continue to expand, like get out into the cellophane wrapper. The second thing they talked about, or like that came through, was like it's time to really live in the present. One of the gifts of being in this wobbliness, in this liminal space, in the middle of this dark tunnel where we can't see the end, is that we can't really live in the future because we don't know what the future is going to be. And so many of us have a lot of our energy invested in the past and invested in the future. And as you do a lot of the release work, you start to release some of the energy that's like being sort of held hostage in the past, because that is depleting, especially physically. But I'm not sure I realized how much of my energy has been invested in the future until I started kind of feeling into this like really deep discomfort. And then my husband and I had a long conversation yesterday about like, what are we doing and where are we going and where do we want to be in a year? And I don't know. And like, what the heck is happening? And because we're in the liminal, like we don't really know. I can't see the end of the tunnel. And it's not one tunnel. It's like, you know, timeline wise, there's like infinite tunnels, and we just like, we're sort of going back and forth between all these tunnels individually and collectively. So it really doesn't do me any good to spend a lot of time like wondering like what the future is going to look like. What serves me is to be in the present and be in the direct experience of the present. And through that is where information about the future always comes for me. When I'm fully in the present, when I'm fully in a direct experience, when I'm in vibration, when I'm in sound especially, there's part of the mind that like lets go, and you're just in the experience of the vibration. And then all of a sudden it's like, I have a vision of what this might look like. I have a vision of what could be here. I have a vision of doing this certain thing. And again, you get into a flow state. The flow state comes from that direct experience, from being in the present. So my suggestion here to work with this is, first of all, just acknowledge that this is difficult. It's meant to be difficult. It's not supposed to be easy. I've been doing energy work professionally for over 20 years, and this year is kind of kicking my butt, energetically, emotionally, and physically. And it's as it should be. Allow grace for yourself. Allow space for rest. If you're in that density and you're just in bed, like I just got really tired and kind of had to lay in bed a little extra for a day or two, like that's part of the integration process. And we're being invited and perhaps even challenged at this point to move more into that space of expansion for more of the time. And when you are in that expansion, you are actually truly in the present, because time isn't linear. So when you're in a quantum space, you're actually experiencing, like, time slows down. I've had every session I've done this week, I keep looking at the clock and being like, how can I possibly have this much time left in the session? And it's because I'm so present in that present moment. I'm so present in my entire body, which includes the quantum body, that extended field, that the time has ceased to move in a way that feels linear, or I've ceased to experience time in a way that moves linearly. So the way, ironically, to move into the future with more grace and trust is to spend more time in the present. And really the only way to actually be present is through direct experience. There's an old show, I think I can link it now on the Spotify. It's episode 73, where I talked about what is direct experience. And one of the reasons I love sound for direct experience is because it has this power to kind of bring you into direct experience without a lot of efforting. So I've been meditating for years, and I can get into a direct experience space through meditation most of the time. Sometimes I'm so dysregulated I can't. Sometimes I'm too tired to do that. Sometimes it's just not working for me. And when I'm like, I don't know what to do, that's when I go to sound, using my own voice, practicing a tones practice for myself, listening to sound, making sound. That is how direct experience works. So the first 164 episodes of the podcast have guided meditations with activations, and there's a lot of sound. There's some sound specific episodes you can search for too. So I think this is a new feature. If you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, you can actually search now, which is great, because I give people episodes all the time, and I used to have to just like go through. Now there's over 200 episodes on Spotify, because there's a few of the bonus episodes on Spotify. So you can search sound and see what comes up. There are some mini sound baths and things that are free. If you want to participate in the sound activation that I'm going to do today, if you want any of the meditations and powerful activations that have come after about episode 164, if you want access to all the great bonus episodes, you can join me in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. It's $11 a month. You get access to all of those things, a community of like-hearted individuals, and some exclusive discounts on things like classes and even virtual one-on-one sessions. So we would love to have you join us there. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are in a challenging time, and we are being invited to show up for ourselves in new ways. This is exciting, can be challenging, it's definitely scary. But as we move through this in between together, we can find these beautiful arrival points where we find some more expansion, some more rest, some more regulation. Whatever the system is calling for can be found in this direct experience. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a beautiful rest of your day or evening. I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays.